Back in December, I got an itch for a new camera, as one does around the holidays, and that itch led me to buying this. The Leitz Minolta CL. This is a Leica M-mount rangefinder camera co-produced by Leica and Minolta, and it shoots 35mm film. I've been using it since the start of the year, and after putting 10 rolls through it, I have a lot of thoughts on this camera. So I bought this camera on eBay for just under $500, including all the taxes and fees and shipping, and that was just for the body. It did come with a working light meter, and it also had a little dent at the top, but that doesn't affect the use of it whatsoever. So I bought this because I knew I wanted to shoot more film this year, and the camera I was using before this was my Canon QL17 G3, which is more of a beginner rangefinder, and I thought it was time to upgrade to a slightly more advanced rangefinder, preferably M-mount. I heavily considered and almost bought a Canon P, but I thought it would be smarter to get an M-mount camera body instead of the LTM mount that the Canon has. So because I put my budget into the camera body, for the first few rolls I was borrowing Faizal's M Hexanon 50mm f2 lens until I later bought the Voigtlander color scope bar 35mm f2.5. A few weeks back I also bought the Kex KMQ light meter because I was getting, annoyed of constantly pulling out my phone to meter, and I also don't like buying batteries for cameras, so I typically don't use the in-camera meter for most cameras. So this is the current setup, and with that, let's get into some of the features and specs of this camera. So this camera is really small. It's literally the exact same size as the QL17, which I don't have with me right now because I'm letting my girlfriend try it out. But yeah, when I got it and I opened the box, I was actually kind of surprised at how small it really was. So this camera has frame lines for 40, 50, and 90mm lenses, and the viewfinder is pretty nice and bright. It's obviously not as bright as some of the other Leica M bodies, but I think for the price, this is super solid, and it's definitely a significant upgrade from the QL17. You have the strap rungs on one side of the camera, so it hangs vertically, which is a bit different, and I'm still not sure if I like it. The shutter speed and ISO dials are at the front of this camera instead of the top, which makes for nice clean top plate. You get shutter speeds up to 1/1000th of a second, as well as bulb mode, and you can set your ASA from 25 all the way to 1600 for light metering purposes. I actually haven't used the light meter in this camera for a few reasons. One of them is that I don't like to rely on batteries, because if your battery dies and you don't have an extra one with you, then that can be a bit of a hassle. And also with this camera specifically, if your battery were to die mid-roll, you actually have to finish your roll before you replace the battery, because the battery compartment is located right under the take-up spool in the camera. So in order to get to that, you have to take off the whole bottom half of the camera, so that's a bit of a quirk. The main lens that I've been using is the Voigtlander color scope bar 35mm f2.5, and it's been a great companion to the camera because of its size and affordability. I think I bought it on eBay for just over $300. When I was using the 50, the balance between the camera and the lens was a little bit off because that lens was bigger and heavier, so anytime you would set it down, it would just kind of fall forward. And it felt a little bit off balance in the hand, I guess. But I do plan on getting a 50 sometime soon, but it would definitely be something that is a little bit smaller, and I'm considering the color scope bar f2.2, but that'll be a future thing. Before I bought this lens, I did some research, and I asked people who own this camera and paired it with a 35mm lens how it was shooting on a 35mm lens when the camera's widest frame lines are at 40. And most people said, that they just use the entirety of the viewfinder to kind of guess their composition. So yeah, that's basically what I've been doing. And it takes a little bit of kind of guessing and looking into the corners of the viewfinder to get your composition, but there's never been a problem where my composition was like severely wider than I envisioned it to be. I don't think this camera has like one single best feature. I think this camera is more of a summation of all its parts and features that makes it a really popular M camera for someone who doesn't want to splurge all this money into a Leica M3 or 4 or 6 or whatever it may be, but also for someone who knows that they will inevitably buy one of those cameras and wants to, test out certain M lenses and see what features are going to be important to them before upgrading. I really love the size of this camera, and even though it sometimes feels a bit too small in my hands, I value how light and easy it is to operate. Being opened to the world of M-mount lenses is also really nice, because if you buy a lens for this camera and you really like it, then you can continue to use it on a different M body if you decide to upgrade in the future. One thing I missed having on the QL17 was 1/1000th shutter speed, and this camera has it, which is nice if I ever want to shoot an 800 speed film in, bright conditions. For people who love shooting 40mm, this is one of the best M-mount cameras you can buy, because not a ton of cameras have frame lines for 40mm, and if you pair it with the Minolta 40mm f2 Rocore lens, then you get yourself a really nice and compact setup. The last thing is that this is a fully mechanical camera. I mean, obviously you can put a battery in it to use the light meter, but there's no electronics in it, so that means the camera would never brick due to electronic failure.
Okay, so typically when I get a new film camera, what I like to do with it is just put a roll through it and then get that roll processed and scanned right away, just to make sure that the camera I bought has no issues. But for some reason I didn't do that with the CL. So I have 11 rolls that I shot over the last 2 months since getting it, and we're finally gonna get these rolls developed. So I'm here at Gelatin Labs, so we're gonna go inside and drop off the film. So let's go.
All of these rolls were developed and scanned by Gelatin Labs, one of the best labs in the business, so a huge thank you to them. This isn't sponsored, but I did get the development and scanning free of charge, but I would use them regardless. Gelatin recently introduced their new gel forms, which is a method of scanning that allows you to be more selective when it comes to how your skins look in terms of temperature and contrast. There are 7 different gel forms, each with different looks. For the rolls that I sent them, I got 7 that were the flat earth gel form, 2 that were the spacely, and 2 that were the noir. I really love how these turned out, and it's just another option for more control of your skins, which is never a bad thing whatsoever. If you want to try out Gelatin for yourselves, the first 10 people to DM them on Instagram with my username in the message will get a special code towards services or film. After that, a limited amount of service-only codes will go out. So, fortune favors the early viewers. Good luck. Now, I know it may seem like I've had nothing but good experiences with this camera. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I think the biggest issue with this camera is its reliability and durability. This camera is not made of metal. It's, made of plastic for the most part, and that's completely fine with me because I know this camera was built to be smaller and lighter than those other brass and metal M bodies. However, I've had 2 different issues with this camera, and one of them is that it has jammed up on me a few times. The shutter curtain is made of this cloth material, and I've read online that this is a common issue, but sometimes the shutter curtain won't fall back into place after taking a photo. And so one of the solutions is to take off the lens and pull the curtain down with your finger, or even just bang on the camera so that the shutter curtain falls into place so you can advance and take the next photo. This happened to me on 2 or 3 separate occasions, and I did notice it to happen when it was actually really cold outside, so I'm not sure if there's any kind of correlation between the temperature outside and the fact that the shutter curtain is made of a cloth material that maybe freezes up and won't fall into place, but I could be totally delusional. I'm not sure if there is correlation between those 2 things, but if you have any, experience with this problem and you have a solution, then please let me know. The other issue has to do with actually loading the film. So some people really like the loading mechanism on this camera, and personally I'm not a fan of it, but maybe it's just a skill issue. In order to load the film, you have to take off the bottom half of the camera, and if you do happen to have a tripod plate attached to the bottom of the camera, then you have to remove that too before you can, put in a new roll. The take-up spool is all plastic, and these little white pieces that hold the film are often subject to cracking or breaking, which I had to be really diligent of when I was scouring eBay for a good copy of this camera. Now, it hasn't happened to me, but it's definitely something that I have to kind of be mindful of whenever I'm loading a roll in, to not, bend one of those plastic pieces too much. When it comes to actually loading the camera, it might take a few attempts, and it can be a bit tricky to get the film to get into the take-up spool without it slipping out when you advance it, which has definitely caused me some issues. On a few occasions, I've loaded a roll into the camera. It looked like it caught in the take-up spool correctly, so all was good. I closed the back of the camera and I advanced the film a few times, took a few shots, and then I looked at the bottom of the camera to see if the rewind knob was turning, and it wasn't. So when that happens, it makes you think that you loaded the film wrong, So, you know, naturally I opened the back of the camera just to find that everything was fine, and now I just exposed a few shots. So that has definitely given me a few headaches. But I've also noticed that sometimes it won't turn on the first few frames because there's too much slack between the canister and the take-up spool, and then it would start to spin after, you know, 5 or 6 shots, and you know, at a certain point it just feels like mind games and you don't really know what to do. So these are just some of the issues that I've dealt with. I'm not really sure if this is by chance, you know, that it's like my copy of the camera that's giving me issues, or if it's simply user error, which is a possibility, and I just still need to, you know, learn how to use this camera correctly. But yeah, these are just things that have given me headaches over the last 2.5 months that I thought were worth mentioning. So I put 9 rolls through this camera, not 10 like the title said, but 10 sounds better. And I shot 3 rolls of Fuji 400 and a roll each of Gold 200, Portra 800, Cine Still 400D, HP5, and Tri-X. It was such a nice surprise getting all these scans back because I almost totally forgot what I shot in that span of 2 months, and I was pretty happy with a lot of the photos I managed to get, considering the several occasions where the camera either jammed up or I thought it was loaded improperly. I shot in New York, in Wildwood, New Jersey, and then just around my neighborhood, and it was nice to also shoot some stocks that I haven't shot in a long time, like Cine Still 400D and Portra 800, as well as try a new one, which was the Tri-X. So aside from the issues that I've dealt with, this camera has been really fun to use in the streets because of its size. You know, it's really light, and I bring it with me on walks around my neighborhood, and it doesn't get in the way. The loading can obviously take some time, but overall it's a fun camera to use when everything is functioning as it should, and it should. You know, the issues that I've had could either just be my copy of the camera, which would be annoying, or simply user error, which would be even more annoying, but that could be fixed. With all that said though, this camera is just another step in the road towards getting a real Leica M body in the future. I'll be using this until I'm ready to invest into a new camera that's probably going to cost me, you know, at least 3 times the price I paid for this, but at least I'll have some lenses to use, which is nice. But for now, I'm just going to continue to use this camera and see how it performs over a longer period of time, and hopefully some of the issues that I talked about will somehow work themselves out. If you've been thinking about buying this camera, I actually would recommend it. You know, even with the issues that I've come across, it hasn't made the need for a M body any more urgent or dire. If you have owned or used this camera and you have any solutions or tips to the things I mentioned, please leave them in the comments. That would be greatly appreciated. And that's all I have for this one. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.